Okay, I'm going to start chapter 28 of the Green Ember. It's called A Bad Good Day. Pickett arrived on the village green after half an hour with Maggie Weaver. He was still thinking about what she had said to him, the very few words she had said, but he must move on. He had to be prepared for what Helmer might throw at him, and he realized that Helmer might actually throw things at him. Pickett wasn't exactly sure why he had asked Helmer to train him. He just immediately knew, when he saw the insane fight with the swinging wooden birds, that this was his rabbit. Pickett wanted nothing more than to be the best warrior he could be, so that he would be ready for the next time he met up with Red-Eyed Grace Garlickson or anyone who was on the Wicked Wolf's side. Today, he got a reluctant wave from Hayward as he passed the neat hedgerows. Pickett noticed with some relief that Hayward was a lot less chatty when Helmer loomed. He took in a deep breath and tried to focus. Helmer lay beneath the tree, wearing his usual black pants and matching shirt, but today he wore a gray jacket with the same red diamond symbol on the breast. It was unsettling walking up to such an unpredictable rabbit. Pickett wasn't sure if he would jump up and attack him or start snoring. As he neared the tree, Pickett thought of attacking the black rabbit himself in a mad flurry. Somehow he thought this might actually impress Helmer. At the last moment, he decided against it. He might be killed doing such a thing. "Good morning, Ladybug," Helmer said, his voice a guttural rasp, as though the air he used to speak was passing through a rusty old gate. "Good morning, Wasp," Pickett said. "Ha," Helmer chuckled, "I like that, but you'll call me Master Child." "Yes, Master Child," Pickett said. "Well, obviously you have a deep soul-level need for humility," Helmer said, levering up onto his elbow. "You'll receive that momentarily. But if you are as courageous on the battlefield as you are full of, well, bristling insanity here, you might do some serious damage before our certain and inevitable defeat." "Certain defeat?" Pickett asked. "Bristling what?" "Lesson 1, Helmer shouted as he kicked his legs up and landed hard on the ground, upright and at the ready. "You listening, Ladybug? Because your apprenticeship starts now." "Yes, Master Helmer," Pickett said, taking a few steps back. "How many weapons do I have?" Helmer asked. Pickett took a quick inventory, though he thought Helmer might be concealing some. "2. Your knife and a sword," Pickett said. Helmer responded with an immediate attack. He hit Pickett, kicked him, took off his jacket, and struck him with it over and over, then threw rocks at him. Pickett scrambled around, trying to dodge rocks, block blows, and escape the whirlwind of the whipping coat. After a few minutes, Pickett was sucking air and begging for mercy. Helmer hadn't done him serious harm, but had just made enough contact in his blows to make Pickett feel them. And Pickett did. Wheezing, he clutched at various hurts all around. Suddenly, his sore foot didn't feel so bad. In fact, he'd gotten around on it okay in his mad dash to escape the onslaught. "This wasp stings, yes?" Helmer asked. "Yes, Master Helmer." "Will you have a sword with you every time you're in a fight, Ladybug?" "No, Master Helmer." "Lesson number 1, Helmer said, kicking a spray of loose dirt into Pickett's face, causing the young rabbit to fall over, digging at his eyes. "I can't see." "Lesson number 1, Helmer said. Everything is a weapon." Helmer looked out over the mossy porch into the heavy fog that blocked out the whole world. She was frustrated, but felt like this was where she belonged. There on the porch, waiting to speak to Mrs. Weaver, she was unable to see far enough to satisfy her desire. She wanted to know what was beyond the fog, both on the mountain and in her heart. She wanted to know. She wanted to see the past, the future, even the present with far more clarity than she had right now. After she had sprinted away from King Whitson's garden and the overheard rumors, the stray pieces of her family's painful secrets, she'd run to her room. She tried to think, tried to reason out answers to the riddles surrounding her. Giving up, she had run to hallway round and then to this porch, hoping to speak with Maggie Weaver, the sage of Cloud Mountain. But all she had done for an hour was wait. wait and peer off into the cloud barrier that summed up all her frustrations. She glanced at the artists, painting their imaginary scenes of beauty, and wanted to spit at them. She didn't, but she felt like she might scream. Maybe then someone would pay attention to her and give her some answers. She sat on the mossy stone, leaning against the gray mountainside, and wept quietly. She worried and wondered and finally dozed off. "Are you all right, dear?" It was Maggie Weaver bending over her and touching her face tenderly. "You were calling for your father." Heather came awake, saw that she was still on the porch and that Mrs. Weaver's kindly face was before her. "I'm sorry," she said, not really thinking. "Oh, don't be sorry, girl," Mrs. Weaver said. "Just come along and let's talk a moment." Heather rubbed her eyes, still wet, and followed behind the hunching form of Mrs. Weaver. They sat down. "I'm sorry," Heather said again. "For what?" "Not sure," Heather said. "I think," she hesitated, "I just want answers, but I'm afraid of what the answers might be." "This is from wisdom, child," Mrs. Weaver said. "Growing up is terribly wonderful, but often it's also wonderfully terrible." Ha, a riddle of words amounting to nothing, a stuttering cleverism that falls as short as my feeble steps. But this is true. A teacher could become rich if he ever perfected the art of helping mature students unlearn awful things. Enjoy your innocence, my dear, even if it only lasts for the day. Pickett limped through hallway round, hurting in a dozen places. Hobbling through the door, he made his way past the bending, intent painters, up the stairs to the level where Mrs. Weaver always sat on the far side. His vision was still spotty from the dirt kicked in his eyes, and one eye was all but swollen shut from a rock that had struck him dead on. He was near the steps when he realized Mrs. Weaver was with someone. He turned quickly to try to slink back and wait his turn, but he heard her say, "Come along, Pickett." Pickett turned again, wincing at the pain, and made his way slowly up to where Heather, he now saw it was her, sat by the sewing sage. When Heather saw Pickett, her hurt turned to fury. "What has that villain done to you?" she shouted. "It's outrageous." "Heather, it's—" Pickett began, but Heather was just warming up. "I'll show him. He should know better than to do this." She crossed quickly to her brother and examined his swollen eye and then the rest of him. "Heather, listen to me." "I can't believe Lord Rake allowed this," Heather said, "after all you've been through." "Heather, seriously, if you'll—" Pickett tried, but Heather wasn't done. "He'll get what's coming to him if it's the last thing I do. I'll—" "Heather," Mrs. Weaver said with some authority. "Yes, ma'am," she said, a little stunned by her tone. "Be quiet," she said firmly, but with a smile, "and sit down, girl." "Yes, ma'am," Heather said, a little puzzled and put out. She sat down, seething like cold potatoes in a hot pan. "Pickett's son, how was your day?" Mrs. Weaver asked. Pickett looked up at her through his swollen eye. He looked over at Heather, then back at Mrs. Weaver, and smiled widely. "It was wonderful." "Good. I'm eager to hear all about it," Mrs. Weaver said. Heather's jaw hung open. "Heather, please be a good young lady and latch that trap of yours. I'm not a doctor, and looking down at your throat, as nice as it is, isn't on my list of things I prefer to do today." Heather shut her mouth. "It was a perfect day," Pickett said, still grinning. "Was that blood on his teeth?" "Good, my boy," Mrs. Weaver said. "I thought it might be. Let it settle on you, Pickett, for the rest of today will be hard." It's the end.